Hello wonderful person, this is Anton, and today we're going to discuss some of the recent discoveries in regards to one of the biggest mysteries coming out of James Webb Space Telescope. The mystery of unexplained ancient galaxies that once discovered appeared a little bit too massive, a little bit too large, and basically just maybe a little bit too impossible to exist so early on, with press releases even suggesting that we're basically facing a kind of a crisis in cosmology. Some scientists believe that it was almost impossible to explain these galaxies, and some of these galaxies should not exist at all. And because one of the primary missions for the James W Space Telescope is to actually discover and study these oldest galaxies, revealing more details about cosmology in the process, all of this naturally was a bit of a shock, or at least at first. Mostly because a lot of these galaxies appear to have become extremely massive very quickly, and none of the modern simulations could explain this. For example, the most popular simulation, known as TNG-50, by the Illustris project, does not produce anything similar. All of the galaxies here are much smaller, less luminous, and are even present in much smaller numbers. And so something here was not actually adding up. On top of this, additional observations started to discover these bizarre formations, now referred to as little red dots, and they seem to be all over the place as well. Very bright, very small, and basically very red. Now you can actually learn about this particular concept in a few videos in the description, but in essence, back in 2023, a lot of this implied that something else is going on here, and maybe there's something wrong with the Big Bang theory, or just with the idea of modern cosmology. But as we've discussed in a lot of previous videos, this turned out to be not the case. There have now been quite a lot of logical, reasonable explanations, basically explaining everything, including the little red dots, with the two recent studies presenting us with even more evidence and more explanation, but also still leaving behind at least one mystery. And so I guess let's discuss all of this, because naturally all of this helps us understand how the universe evolved and what actually happened in those first few moments, or the first few millions of years, right after the Big Bang. And yeah, by the way, the Big Bang theory has not been invalidated yet. It still seems to stand, and there still seems to be quite a lot of supporting evidence. And so let's start with this study first by Catherine Chorowski and her team. Here, a lot of this was based on the SEER survey that, as the name suggests, explores the evolution of the early universe. And the main question here was really in regards to these unusual little red dots and a lot of other bright galaxies that appear to be much brighter than they should be, or I guess than they were simulated previously. So basically here, even though simulations showed us that we should expect small, relatively dim galaxies, in reality they were much brighter and appear to be significantly more massive. But very thorough investigations involving analysis of the redshifts and the blueshifts discovered something very specific about most of them. In pretty much every case, a lot of these overly massive galaxies showed signs of a lot of fast-moving gas somewhere near the center, moving in a very specific circular motion, essentially suggesting that we're looking at extremely powerful and very large accretion disks, where a tremendous amount of friction from the fast-moving gas starts to produce a lot of heat and a lot of light, making these galaxies appear much brighter than they should be. Or basically, even though at first it was assumed to be light from stars, it seemed to be light from the accretion disk, with all of this extra light making the galaxies from this distance appear as if they had a lot more stars. And that's because the light here is actually relatively similar, and because these galaxies are just ridiculously far away. And so once the researchers accounted for these little red dots and compared all of this to other remaining early galaxies, pretty much everything started to fit in place. Here there was no longer any controversy, and everything seemed to fit with the predictions from modern cosmology. And so in many cases, all of this seems to be the result of very massive, or actually overly massive black holes, with very fast-moving hydrogen gas that creates the accretion disk. However, there was still a bit of a problem. In terms of actual numbers, the overall number of galaxies still seemed to be a little bit higher, actually twice as high as what has been expected from previous simulations. And here the explanation provided from this paper actually directly connects to the second paper we're going to be discussing, because researchers now believe that, for some reason, in this bizarre early universe, 13.4 to 13.6 billion years ago, stars potentially formed much more efficiently and much quicker, with a lot of these early galaxies forming in tremendous numbers compared to what we expected. So in other words, in these early galaxies, for some reason they were just much better at turning gas into stars. Now there's no exact explanation yet, but because we know that the universe was still just a little bit more dense back then, this is possibly one of the answers. And so even though in modern universe, we know that galaxies around us reached a kind of an equilibrium between the gas contraction that results in overdensities and star formation, and the emissions from hot gas that cause some of this gas to fly apart, it seems that in the early universe, this whole balance thing might have been just a little bit different. And so because of the higher density, it was potentially just a little bit more difficult for galaxies to blow gas away and to thus stop star formation. But there is another intriguing answer. It's from this paper by Stefano Carniani and his team on essentially the 2 farthest galaxies discovered so far. This is from the JWST Advanced Deep Extragalactic Survey that discovered these 2 galaxies known as JWST-14-1 and -0. 2 extremely faraway galaxies that James Webb was able to capture when the universe was just under 300 million years old. And you can learn about the actual discovery and all of the results from one of the previous videos in the description. But essentially here, these galaxies were once again thoroughly analyzed, in this case involving a very large international team, in order to discover why these galaxies are so unusual. Mostly because, once again, they are kind of super bright, at least this one, and it also appears to be much bigger than expected. As a matter of fact, this is one of the largest galaxies discovered in the ancient universe. Although here I guess maybe I shouldn't call it the largest. It's still super tiny compared to anything around us, so this is just the largest out of all ancient galaxies discovered so far. So from one end to another, it's approximately 850 light years. That's obviously over 100 times smaller than the Milky Way galaxy. But the analysis also revealed that it contains a lot of dust, a lot of oxygen, and is obviously just a little bit too bright. And so the question was this brightness coming from the black hole once again, or from something else? And so here the analysis almost definitively established that it's not the black hole. And by analyzing this galaxy for 10 hours, using observations in the infrared, they confirmed that the light was definitely coming from star formation. Extremely young stars formed millions of years after the Big Bang, with huge amounts of star formation in various burst regions that we actually often observe around us as well. So here this is a result of overdensity when all of the gas collides, causing star formation for millions of years. And specifically, this was actually confirmed by observing a point around the galaxy that seems to represent a kind of a halo away from the center, where a lot of this star formation and brightness seems to be coming from. So because this is not the core and not where the black hole is located, the only other source that's possible is of course stars. But in this case, it seems to have been going on for approximately 100 million years. And so as a result, surprisingly, they actually found quite a lot of dust and quite a lot of oxygen. Oxygen in this case can only be produced after several supernovae. And so this super early galaxy has actually already experienced several generations of stars that came into existence when supernova and already formed second generation stars that seem to be producing all of this brightness. Which of course suggests that 300 million years right after the Big Bang, the luminous stars with relatively complex elements already seem to exist. And this is not something scientists believed was possible before James Webb became operational. So this is just one of those unusual discoveries that now needs to be analyzed and understood a little bit better. But once again, this does not really break cosmology and does not invalidate the Big Bang theory. Here the evidence actually supports the opposite. The Big Bang seems to have happened, and the early universe was just a little bit different from the universe around us today. Possibly in terms of density, or possibly in terms of some other property we still don't understand. But in essence, all of these recent discoveries seem to confirm a lot of modern astrophysical theories and present us with a very intriguing, somewhat mysterious, but not completely incomprehensible view of the universe. Which means that in the next 10 years, once the James Webb actually discovers even more, we'll probably have so many more incredible answers and so many more solutions to various mysteries. And so until then, check out some of the previous videos, somewhere in the description. Thank you for watching, subscribe, share this with someone who loves learning about space and sciences, come back tomorrow to learn something else, support this channel on Patreon by joining channel membership or by buying the Wonderful Person t-shirt you can find in the description. Stay wonderful, I'll see you tomorrow, and as always, bye bye.